I love this. I love this. What a great, good-looking group of people we have in this room. Well, good morning, buenos dias for some of you. And if you don't know, buenos dias is good morning in Spanish. And I will also say, and we'll see how our sign language interpreters say, welcome to you all. It's great to be here today. For those of you joining us on live stream, welcome as well. It's great to have you here this morning. A little shout out first to our ASL interpreters that are here. Thank you for being here. And also, I wanted to point out something really cool. We've got this great logo here, and one of our staff, Madalena, who you might have met, designed it based on the Costa Rican designs that you might be seeing around this hotel. So extra props to her as well this morning. My name is Frank So. Yes. My name is Frank So. I'll be guiding you through these next 2 days. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. One of the fun things I get to do, besides learn about all your programs, is also give you some housekeeping information. So, the first thing you should know is, ¿Dónde están los baños? Where are the bathrooms? The closest set of bathrooms will be located directly behind you and to your right. We have both men's and female bathrooms, so feel free to use those when you need to. A secondary set of bathrooms are located down the hallway where you came in, to the right as you go to the lobby, but it'll be just in that corner. Anyway, the closest bathrooms are behind you, so feel free to use those when you need to. We have a lot of folks here, we have a lot of technology, and we have a lot of phones. So, I'm going to ask you, if you've got a phone, to please turn the sound off, not your phone, just the sound off, and continue to send those texts, messages, and tell people about this awesome event that we're here at. All right. The other thing we want to go through, which is really important for us, is to keep this place a safe place. As you can see here, a place that's harassment-free and open and inviting to everyone. As such, we have a code of conduct. If you don't know that code of conduct, you can find it online. And if you have any issues, please let me or any of the other staff know. We want you to have fun. We want you to be comfortable here. And there's a lot of you that might be new. And if you are new, please feel free to reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm new. I want to meet someone. And if you've been here before, meet someone new. Welcome them. So take care of each other. Take care of your colleagues. We'd love you guys to take photos. We would love for you all to tag us. We'd love for you to tag us at Interledger and the hashtag ILP Summit 23. Now, there's another cool thing about this, and that is we're being respectful to all, and not all want their photos taken. So, if you see someone with a white lanyard, feel free to take their picture. If you see someone with a purple lanyard, please don't take their photo. All right. I think that's pretty easy. Now, there are no planned alarms. We have no grade school fire alarms today. But what we do have is a warning to you. If you do hear an alarm of any sort, please proceed to the exit, which either is behind you or as you came in that hallway. Do not go to my right or your left, because that's the kitchen unless you're really hungry. Okay, great. I referenced, if you have any questions, to please come see one of us at the staff who is wearing one of these black shirts. So if you see or have any questions, that's right, you've got a model right there. There's Alex modeling his shirt. Yes. So if you have any questions throughout your time here, please find someone in a black shirt. Staff will also be directing you as to where to go if you don't know, to any of our breakout rooms, or if you have any questions about where we're eating or anything of the sort. Well, enough of this. We have some exciting things to get to. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our first keynote speaker, the CEO and president of Interledger Foundation. Please put your hands together for Brianna Marbury. Brianna, welcome.
It's on the wrong side. It's on the wrong one. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It is so exciting to have you here. I got to talk to some of you last night during our unofficial kickoff at the reception, and welcome to those joining on the live stream. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the friends who couldn't be here today because of civil unrest that's going on right now in the Middle East. We at the Interledger Foundation support a shared vision for peace. Our work for advocating for open payments, to support vulnerable populations' access to digital financial services is and remains essential. Our theme this year in Costa Rica is Ecosystems for Growth, which is why Costa Rica was the perfect place for us to have our summit. We are currently in the most diverse place on our planet. Even though it represents just 1/13 of the Earth's surface, it is the most biodiverse place in the world. This small country has such a huge impact on everyone around it and serves as a bridge to those in North and South America. It enables the passage of fauna and flora to flourish because of that bridge. And that's how I see us at the Interledger Foundation. We are a bridge that connects different systems together. Can you change the, thank you. We bring together diverse perspectives into the world of finance, and we shake up the status quo and present different solutions that meet everyone's needs. And we show different ways of doing things that create fair and better environments so digital financial services work for everyone, everywhere. Our vision is a world where everyone can send a payment as easily as an email. And since we started the foundation in 2020, we have given over $14 million to 40 countries and 222 projects. And the best thing about those projects, each one of them has a focus on interoperability. Are there several companies and organizations right now that are working on interoperability or capturing emerging markets? Sure, but they're still doing it in a way that's constructing infrastructure with siloed networks. It's almost like they don't understand what interoperability is and they don't know how to play nice together. But we at the Interledger Foundation, we know how to play nice together, and, well, most of the time. Please do not listen in to the summit meetings. It was very interesting how bringing this together, some of the infighting amongst the staff, but this is a beautiful event. And one thing that I find really interesting when we go out and talk to a lot of our partners is they don't understand why it is we're doing what we're doing. They say, why are you doing this? What's in it for you? Is this a scam? It's like, no, this is not a scam. And I continue to tell them that our only hope is to work with people who have great ideas. You went too fast, sorry. Work with people who have great ideas to solve problems around payments within their own communities. Our grant-making model is slightly different from other organizations, and we don't go into a community and say, this is the answer that we have for you, we know all of your problems, we're here to tell you the best way to fix them. We go into communities and say, you know, we demonstrate when people who are living the experiences are included in determining their solutions. Together, meaning all of us in this room, are helping to shift the trajectory of the 1.4 billion people in the world that are still excluded from digital financial services. We've made progress so far, and we're going to continue to make progress. However, I feel like all of you know who I am, and you see me all the time, but I am just a small part of what makes up this amazing organization. So for this keynote, I wanted to bring forth some of the voices who are just as passionate about financial inclusion and opening up the world of digital access to some of the people who you may not see as often. So we'll have some staff people come up and talk to you about our work, and starting with Julaire Hall. Please welcome Julaire to the stage.
Thank you, Brianna. Hello, everyone. The ILF program team, which comprises of myself, Chris, Aisha, and Lowell, somewhere out in the crowd, designs and manages grant programs centered around the vision of enabling communities that are building and working on projects that expand financial access and inclusion. In 2003, we've created spaces for our members and persons within those communities to learn from each other and exchange ideas. We've hosted a series of engagement activities, including but not limited to monthly community calls and bi-monthly open payments huddles, which pretty much facilitates open and creative conversations about what's happening in our Interledger ecosystem. Our community activities are open to all, and we'd love for more of you to join us. This year, we've continued to grow and refine our grant programs and improve our delivery model in addressing any infrastructural gaps impeding our quest to support the broader ILF mission. As many of you know, we had a financial services grant opportunity that was launched last year. And based on the results that we've seen encouraging progress, and we've decided that going forward, we are going to make that program a cornerstone initiative for us. And that program was geared towards introducing more nodes within our Interledger network. We continue to build on the success of our work with Bowie State University and are expanding our focus in helping to shape the future cadre of financial inclusion advocates. Our ILF University collaborations seek to create opportunities for people to hear new perspectives that can broaden their possibilities and help them to be equipped to think about careers in open payments, open source, fintech, and social change. Our strategy is to create more diverse pathways for undergraduate and graduate students to create a future where people aren't just fixing systematic issues or legacy issues, but they are building fairer, inclusive, and interruptible payment networks from the beginning. At last year's summit, many of you would have seen the cohort of students that were here, and I see Dr. Mankel smiling. And we've continued to work with Bowie State University, and this year we do have a new cohort of students in the audience. So last year, some of the students benefited from engaging and interacting with our grantees and members from the community and have, chosen different career pathways. This year, we hope the same for this cohort. Please mingle, interact, and have conversations with the community. But we're also excited about new partnerships with universities that are coming on stream. Much of the work that we do is about bringing new voices into the tech ecosystem to spark new conversations. This year, we've invited artists as part of our Art and Culture Grant to create works that explore the role that financial inclusion and exclusion plays in the future. To learn more about this, we invite you to visit the Future Money Open Studios, which is behind here, so that you can connect with our artists as well as our art ambassadors, Kokai Walker and Hollis Wang Ware. As well as bringing new voices into the ecosystem, we've partnered with organizations to expand our collaborative reach. For example, ILF partners with Mozart, supporting it to establish a new bank charter. We're also enabling Findboss to launch its digital wallets in multiple jurisdictions. And we're partnering with Action and the Center of Financial Inclusion to grow the movement for global financial inclusion. I'm sure you would have seen all three partners last night at the Grantee Showcase, and if you have not interacted with them, we are happy that they're here. They're here this year, so please feel free to connect. Our grants support people building with the Interledger protocol, which wouldn't be possible without the brilliant work and dedication of our tech team. So now, I am delighted to hand over to Max, who will tell you more about what the tech team has been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Mic check. Hello, everyone. My name is Max. I'm on the tech team, and I'll be giving some updates for what we've done over the year. We've grown a lot since the last summit, and as a result, a lot of work has been done. When it comes to Rafiki, our open source software that enables interledger functionality on different financial institutions, this year has been marked by several alpha releases, the first one of which came in March. This was the first release that we had and during developer meetup in Cape Town. Since then, we've had 4 more releases, and now we're on version number 5. In those alpha releases, we've had several features that have landed. So first of which is the admin UI. It is the way for Rafiki integrators to help manage their instance, all in a nice-to-use way. We also have had added telemetry and analytics into Rafiki to be able to see exactly what's going on in the instance as well as what's going on in the network. For developers to get acquainted with the Rafiki software, we have made some changes to the local playground as well. So if you're part of the hackathon on Wednesday, you can see for yourself these changes and play around with it. A big theme that you'll see throughout our tech updates is a big push for documentation. So we kind of started with very limited documentation at the start of the year, but now we have standardized our docs across all of our different Interledger products, let's say. So you can see for yourself at rafiki.dev, this is our developer portal. Shamelessly, I'm going to plug a presentation later in the day with myself and our engineering lead, Sabina. If you want to learn more about Rafiki and everything that has landed over the year, we are in the breakout room at first one at 1:15, so if you want to learn more. A big initiative this year was the test network, so we really want to be able to spin up Interledger nodes in the test network and be able to move funds across the network. So we've partnered with this amazing team from Romania called Breakpoint IT to lay down the foundations of this test network. This is the result, and it's called the test wallet. It's Rafiki.money, and it's an Interledger-first digital wallet built from Interledger and Rafiki from the ground up. And you can try for yourself at Rafiki.money to see how easy it is to send money between different accounts. To get more Rafiki instances and developers onto the network, we've made it really easy to spin up your own Rafiki instance and peer with Rafiki money, so you can start exchanging money, and you can see as an example how to exchange money in the test environment. We've also released what's called Rafiki Boutique. This is the open payments. What looks like to show what e-commerce looks like in an open payments world. We released Rafiki.boutique. So instead of having to enter your banking information or your card information, you can just get a payment pointer from Rafiki.money and see exactly how an e-commerce transaction would look like in an open payments world, let's just say. When it comes to open payments itself, it's our API standard for third parties to allow a standardized and a secured way to move funds between digital wallets. We've had some changes in this area as well. First of all, we released a Node SDK for developers to get acquainted with the API, as well as start building it into their own products. We've updated the API itself to change some of the terminology that we use, as well as laying down the groundwork for payment methods, all kinds of different payment methods in open payments to make it more interoperable. And of course, as you can see, the theme of the update this year is documentation, so we have some additional documentation available at Open Payments doc guide. When it comes to web monetization, we've released a new specification with all to support open payments. We've been working on a new extension to be able to roll out all of these new specification changes. We've been also working with browsers to experiment with this new technology, and we're continuing to receive feedback from them and work with them closely to try out web monetization and make it browser friendly. Documentation, again. So yeah, more documentation has been released on web monetization and to really unify all of our, let's say, Interledger products across our ecosystem. And with this, I'm going to pass it over to Judy, who's going to tell us all about the amazing work that the strategy and communication team has been doing to spread the word of Interledger. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Max. And hello, everyone. This year, our strategy has been to promote Interledger to new audiences to get them excited about our work and the potential of the Interledger protocol. We ran our first receptions in Washington, D.C. and New York City, and we're a part of the Global Digital Development Forum, hosting an online panel and an in-person event, which included speakers from the Brazilian Embassy, Head of Trade Policy, Carolina Castellini, Andrea Zaruz from the People's Clearinghouse, and our very own Brianna Marbury. Our reception has been in support of the UN General Assembly to create space for people to discuss the vital role of open payments in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've built exciting inroads with new countries and global leaders in financial inclusion that you'll hear about later. Over the last 2 years, we have been busy raising the profile of Interledger globally in the media. We received coverage in over 70 media outlets that included top-tier, financial, and tech media from around the world, reaching over 10 million media impressions. Requests continue to come for our leadership team's comments and ideas, and our thought leadership continues to grow. We have also relaunched our website, and with new dedicated sections to open grant opportunities and the latest skills, and we'll continue to build a dynamic hub for the Interledger community and beyond to share and celebrate the work that they are doing. We always love to promote the work of the community, so please come talk to me at the summit if you have a story that you would like to share. Thank you very much.
Can you give them all another round of applause, please? Thank you so much to the staff. They were not excited when I asked them to be a part of the rolling keynote, but they were good sports, so thank you again. I hope you enjoyed hearing from some of our amazing staff. And I look at Interledger as not just being a protocol, but a vision. It is a pathway to a future where money and value flow seamlessly across networks, across borders, and across barriers. It's a technology that has the power to revolutionize the way we transact and interact, and I couldn't be more excited about the prospects that lie ahead. So over the next few days, I encourage you to ask questions, challenge assumptions, give your insights. This time together is not about passive listening, but about engaging with each other, networking, and most importantly, working together to build a future for the vision of Interledger. thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to talking to all of you here at the summit. Thank you.
Another hand for Brianna, please. Thank you. What a great visionary and a woman who cares so much about what you all are doing. In fact, it's amazing to hear about all the advances. I think I heard correctly, $14 million dispersed, 40 countries. Absolutely amazing. It's been enlightening to hear a lot about the advances that support and further digital financial inclusion, the agenda, the ecosystem, and where we're going next. That vision is very important, so thank you very much. Now, it should come as no surprise that we have another great person here that will be speaking to you next. Our next keynote is someone who needs no introduction. Let's please welcome up on stage Stefan Thomas. Stefan, come on up.
Hello, everybody. Let me plug in. There we go. Well, it's so great to be back at another Interledger Summit. At the risk of being a bit repetitive, I also want to thank Brianna and the whole staff for putting together such an amazing event once again. When the community didn't have the Interledger Foundation, we didn't have events like this, and it's just incredible to see so many people interested in the technology, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be speaking to you today. So the project I'm going to talk about is called Dasi. It's something that I announced a year ago at the last summit, and that I've been working on ever since. Dasi is an open source project, and as we go into the presentation, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But before I get into that, I want to kind of set a foundation here. Obviously, we're at the Interledger Summit, so probably most of you will have your own answers to this question. Why are you interested in Interledger? I'll give you my answer, which is pretty technical, pretty unique to me, I guess, but maybe you'll find it interesting. So as a developer, I kind of grew up with the internet and the web, and I found it to be just this absolutely magical tool. It's sort of like something that allows my software to communicate with software all around the world. You can build applications that brings people together and connects people, and it just feels like you have some kind of psionic superpower where you can talk to other computers around the world. And at the same time, as a tool, it sort of stays in the background. And I just found that experience to be very, very powerful. But the second you try to do anything like move money around, that whole experience goes away. So for me, the idea of Interledger and getting to Interledger protocol was really all about trying to figure out how to bring that magical experience to money. And so to do that, we first have to kind of break down what that experience consists of. Like, why does the internet feel so magical to us developers as a tool? And I think a tool is magical when it sort of just makes your life easier. You don't have to think about it very much. It works instantly. You don't sit there waiting, okay, when is this thing going to actually complete? It's very easy to pick up, so there's not a lot of complexity if you're just using it. Maybe it does a lot of complicated things in the background, but it's not necessarily something that you as a user or as a developer using this tool have to think about. It's also very important that it grows with you. So the internet is something that works great for my prototype, my hobby project that I'm doing over in my garage, but it also works for Google and some of these giant tech companies that are serving billions of people. So it's really incredibly scalable. And it's also kind of feels elegant, right? It's just an elegant solution to the problem. And I think that's important because that's what makes you excited to work with it and excited to pick it up. And so if you wanted to bring some of these things to money, how would you do it? And for me, I kind of got my start in this space, in this industry, in blockchain. I got into Bitcoin very early on. And I was kind of attracted to it as like, maybe this is the TCP/IP for money. Some people have said that. And so, I kind of got very excited initially. But then when you kind of look at this list and you look at, what it's like to work with a lot of blockchain technology, it's not really instant, right? You're waiting for a Bitcoin block to be generated 10 minutes later. So you're kind of waiting around. It makes your life easier, but it also adds a lot of new complexity. I'm famous for having lost a crypto wallet just by losing my keys. So that certainly didn't make my life any easier. It's not necessarily easy to pick up. There's a lot of things you need to learn if you want to use blockchain. And the scalability is also not really there, right? Like, we have a lot of issues with blockchain scalability because it's a shared ledger. Everybody needs to hear about every transaction that's made on the entire system, and so it doesn't really feel scalable. And maybe in a more subtle sense, there's also a lack of scalability because, you know, there's this economic aspect to blockchain where, you know, each blockchain has their own built-in token, and whoever got in early in that token sort of gets rich, and then everyone else who has to buy in later gets screwed. And so that's not a very equitable way to build a global piece of infrastructure. And so how is Interledger different? How does Interledger sort that out? So Interledger is kind of the magical protocol for money because it's a lot more like TCP/IP. It doesn't have a built-in token. It doesn't have anybody getting rich other than, you know, if they build a great company on top of it. And it is supposed to, and I don't know if we're quite there yet in terms of the actual developer experience, but I think we're on the path towards making it feel like that super powerful, elegant tool that you can just pick up. So for me, that's what Interledger represents. It's the true TCP/IP for money. It's a magical tool for if you want to just move money from one place to another and not have to think about all the details. That's what Interledger protocol is designed to be able to do. Okay, now we already have Interledger protocol, so why am I starting this project Dasi? What is Dasi, and why do we need it? And so, you know, over the past, that's coming on almost 10 years now that we've been working on Interledger, one of the problems that we kept running into is people wanted to pick up the technology, but there wasn't any way for them to get onto the network. There wasn't anyone to connect to. That could be because some of the wallets were geographically limited. Sometimes it was because of expensive or complex onboarding processes. Sometimes it was because you needed to have a certain amount of like minimum volume for a wallet to really be interested in your business. And so there's always been this like hurdle of how do I actually connect to the network. And kind of going back to the blockchain analogy, well, that's one problem that I didn't experience when I was working with Bitcoin. You just download the Bitcoin client and you're good to go. You're pretty much on the network. And so the reason that works is because the network is just made up of the users. It's a peer-to-peer network. So in a way, we are the network, right? And we can do that for Interledger too. So we can make a peer-to-peer implementation of the protocol where you just spin up a node, it connects to other nodes that are running the same software, and now you form a network, and now you can transact with each other using Interledger. Now, there are definitely some challenges with that. Interledger wasn't really designed for that. Originally, the vision was much more like a more explicit peering-based protocol. So, you know, everybody kind of manually manages their nodes, puts a lot of effort into deciding who to peer with, and so on. And that's kind of baked into some of the assumptions behind Interledger. And so the challenge with building something like Dasi is, can you make it so that everything is automatic? Because Dasi should feel magical. It should be, you just download it, it automatically finds other Dasi nodes to connect to, it automatically picks a node to peer with and you know, actually do the financial part of the system, and actually doing the settlement automatically as well, so you don't have to constantly manage your liquidity. My background is I worked at a company called Ripple, where we also built kind of credit networks that were peer-to-peer based. And one of the biggest issues we ran into is settlement is something that banks do, and of course they have employees worried about reconciliation and so on. But when you're asking individual users who are just trying to, you know, build an application or something to worry about settlement and reconciliation, their eyes glaze over and they don't do it. And so you get all kinds of liquidity issues in that network. And so all of that has to be automatic for Dasi to feel magical. So now I want to kind of give you a little bit of an explanation of how Dasi works. There's definitely, because it uses Interledger, there's a lot of overlap with how Interledger works, but you know, there's still some nuances. So I'm going to represent a Dasi node as kind of a circle. It's sort of the universal language of peer-to-peer language, peer-to-peer network talks is that we use dots and lines, so you get a lot of those. Now, one node by itself is not very interesting. It doesn't make up a network, so we're going to have a second node, and we're going to have them peer with each other. So now they are connected to each other. They can send Interledger packets between each other, And when they've sent a bunch of packets, they might send some real money to settle the traffic and settle those transactions. And so that's how they're able to move money around. Now, again, still not very interesting. I think this is sort of something that already exists. For example, if you're familiar with the Bitcoin Lightning Network, so that's a network where it sits on top of a blockchain. It uses that underlying blockchain for settlement, but then the actual transactions are just from node to node. So it's actually quite similar up to this point. Well, what if we wanted to introduce another currency? And this is where my slides stop reacting. Fun. Hello? I'm sorry. Page unresponsive. Excellent. That is my karmic punishment for getting too fancy with the slides. All right, I think we are back in business. All right, so what if we wanted to introduce another currency to the system? Now, we can't just add this new currency to the network because the amounts are different. The currency is going to be settled on a different ledger, so the existing nodes that are used to settling on one ledger are not going to understand that. And so the way we're going to do that is we're essentially going to create a whole another separate network. In my previous talk, I called this a subnet. And then we're going to have one node that is just present on both networks, and it takes care of the currency exchange. And so you can sort of think of the purple part of the system as one network, and then the yellow part of the system is another network, and there's just one node that happens to be part of both. And through the magic of Interledger, we're able to translate from one currency to the other, and we can still make a transaction from anywhere within any of these networks. Now, when I actually went to implement this, usually practice is a good way to find out if your theory is any good. And it turned out that this is much more complicated than I thought it would be, because you're essentially routing within each network, and then you're routing again across networks. And you have two layers of routing, and that just gets very complex. And so just to kind of illustrate this, now I sort of think of Dasi as just one big network, and the only difference is that between any pair of nodes, they might use one settlement mechanism or another settlement mechanism, but you just have one network. And it may be a way to explain this a little bit more, if it's not quite clicked yet, is previously a Dasi Interledger address would look something like this. So you have G, which is always the global Interledger, so that's sort of the global instance of Interledger. Das means Dasi, so this is like all the Dasi nodes on Interledger. But then we had another sub-identifier, which is for this subnetwork. And so the subnetwork is sort of partitioning the overall Dasi network into a bunch of different subnetworks. And then you have the specific node. And so by getting rid of the subnetworks, we get rid of that entire layer of the hierarchy. There's no more subnetworks, and now we just have all the Dasi nodes are part of one global network, and that made routing a lot easier. So that's one of the biggest changes since I last gave a talk about Dasi. We sort of combined it into one network. All right, now a different way of thinking about this is, you're building this Dasi software, and ideally, eventually, we want to support like all the ledgers in the world and every possible way of settling. It really should be universal as much as possible. And when we had these subnetworks, I realized that it was going to be an issue every time you wanted to add a new settlement mechanism. So let's say you wanted to add Bitcoin, or you wanted to add XRP, or some other cryptocurrency, or maybe some totally different way of settling. You first had to figure out how to get some nodes that people would run so you get a large enough subnetwork to make it viable. And so the network building was sort of something you'd have to do again and again and again for each ledger. But by combining it from a bunch of disparate subnetworks into one big network, now there's already a network. You just connect to the Dasi network. And so the network building is something that we can solve once. We can build the Dasi network up. And then even if there's only one other person that settles using the currency that you want to settle in, that's enough. You don't have to have enough nodes to make like a viable subnetwork. Now, another thing that every peer-to-peer network has to solve is Sybil resistance. And I know this is where it gets a little bit technical, but please bear with me. It's not as complicated as it sounds. So a Sybil attack is when somebody creates a lot of fake nodes and joins a network with the purpose of maybe outvoting everyone else or overwhelming the network in some way. And so whenever you're building a peer-to-peer network, you have to find some way to impose a kind of a cost onto people creating nodes so that you don't get overwhelmed by fake nodes. Now, the way that the Bitcoin Lightning Network does this is it says, well, you already have to have some Bitcoin on the Bitcoin ledger, and so if you want to join the Lightning Network, well, you have to prove that you own these Bitcoin, and you have to kind of show the ownership of that. And so that prevents people from creating like huge amounts of fake nodes and overwhelming the routing algorithm, for example. Now, what that means, though, is that the solution using the Bitcoin ledger only works for the Bitcoin ledger. So what if we want to use a different ledger? Well, then we have to come up with another Sybil resistant solution. And so it's, again, a problem that we have to solve once for each ledger. And so I moved away from that model and towards a model where the nodes use an interledger payment to register with other Dasi nodes, and that's how we impose a cost. And because it's an interledger payment, it's ledger agnostic, and therefore we can solve this problem once, and we don't have to solve it again and again for each new ledger that we integrate. Another thing that isn't implemented yet, but something that I'm thinking about, is how liquidity management works. So the initial approach that you might take is saying, okay, well, we're going to send money, money's coming in on this ledger, we're sending it out on that ledger, so maybe Dasi has some kind of integration with a crypto exchange so that when money comes in one cryptocurrency and maybe goes out as a fiat currency, we can go to the crypto exchange to exchange that. But that means that Dasi, the software, has to contain code that knows how to talk to every crypto exchange, how to deposit and withdraw money from those exchanges. And of course, that code can be very security sensitive because you're having access to the crypto that you're depositing and withdrawing. So that can be very dicey to get right. And so I had this idea that maybe what Dasi does is it just adjusts the exchange rates based on the way the money is flowing. So for example, if there's a lot of money flowing from Bitcoin to XRP, then the XRP just get more and more expensive. And so what that does is it creates an arbitrage opportunity for some trader to come along and say, okay, I'm going to send money the other direction and actually make money. And if that is happening enough, if there are enough people chasing those arbitrage opportunities, then those exchange rates will go back down to wherever the real price is, and the Dasi nodes didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to think about it. And as a result, we don't have to integrate with exchanges. We don't have to worry about how to do liquidity management within the Dasi system. That's sort of externalized into other people who want to go after those opportunities. And so that's another way to reduce the amount of things that we have to implement per ledger. And so with some of these changes, the goal is, or the result is, that we just have the settlement that's left. So if you want to add a new ledger, the only thing you have to implement is, well, how do I send money across that ledger? And that's sort of by definition, the one thing you always have to implement for a new ledger. But the idea is that Dasi sort of takes care of all the difficult things, all the complicated peer-to-peer distributed system stuff, and if somebody wants to come along and integrate their favorite ledger, maybe bring Dasi to a new country or integrate a new currency, they can do that without having a lot of complexity. So that's some of the changes that have happened over the last year. Oh. Giving it a second. Let me just replug this. This bodes well for the live demo, by the way. I don't know why we've just gone dark. Oh, here we go. All right, nobody breathe. All right, now a bit of a progress report. It's been a year. I kind of wish I would be further along, but here I am. So we've implemented, or I've implemented a lot of the peer-to-peer network components, so the network protocol, nodes talking to each other, but there's also still a lot of work left in terms of error handling. A lot of the cryptography is not implemented yet, so there's a lot of work to do. The connector right now is pretty rudimentary, and the UI is extremely minimalistic. The only thing you can do is send from one node to another. But we got a foundation, and we also have a test net. So there are now public nodes that anyone can connect to. So if you want, you can download Dasi and install it, and you can connect to the network. A little bit more detail around some of the features. So there's an installer, which I think is pretty good to use. I'm sure there will be other improvements, but it kind of works. There's an auto updater. I thought that was really important to have early so that when people are developing with the test network, we're going to want to move quickly, make lots of changes, and so the auto updater will update the whole network once a day so that everyone's on the latest version. Other than that, there's no discovery, auto-peering, the ILP connector all sort of basically implemented, but there's a lot of important things missing still. And then the settlement right now is purely simulation. So there's no actual integration with any ledger. It is purely just simulating what a settlement might be on a real ledger, but it's not actually doing anything. So, I don't know. It's not going to sleep, it's up. It's just somewhere the signal's getting lost. Okay. All right. And now we get to the live demo. Fantastic. All right, so the first thing I want to show is kind of the installation process for Dasi. So on the Dasi website, which is dasi.land, here we go. On the Dasi website, which is dasi.land, you can see the instructions for how to install Dasi. There is, just let them work on that for a second. There we go. Thank you for your patience, by the way. This is always. Thank you. All right, we're good? All right, cool. Yeah, so this is the Dasi land website, dasi.land. That's where you find all the instructions on how to install it. The prerequisites you need is you need to have a Linux server. So right now this is really aimed at developers. For everyone else, just stay tuned. Probably by the next summit, we'll have a lot of cool apps that are building on top of this to show you. You need to have HTTP ports open to the world, and you need to have a publicly accessible IP address, and then you just run this one command. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and hopefully we've had enough technical issues for one talk. So here we go. So it kind of downloaded Dasi, it installed it, and now we get to the initialization wizard. So the initialization, what that does is get us a TLS certificate so that we can have HTTPS. So we need to tell it what is the publicly accessible host name for this host. And hopefully I don't do any typos here. We need to agree to the terms of service of Let's Encrypt, which is what we're going to use to generate the certificate. And then we need to give it an email address so they can contact us. And now it's going through the challenge process. And hopefully we will soon get a certificate. And there we go, we got a certificate. So that's good. And then we can hop over to the browser. Now, everything else we can do in the browser. So that's kind of, we're done in the terminal. We can click on that. And now we have Dasi opening in the browser. And as you notice, that URL contained like a token. So somebody else can't just go to our Dasi node and set it up for us and mess with it. Only we can set it up. And I'm going to generate a new wallet here. So we get a wallet passphrase. Obviously, this is all testnet, so you're welcome to steal my virtual money. But we're going to copy that passphrase and put it into a text editor. So we can say, yes, we've written it down. And now it's asking us to confirm that we wrote it down. So it's asking us for the 10th word, which happens to be tornado. So we're going to enter tornado. And now we have a wallet set up. Now the next step is we need to choose a settlement mechanism. So this is where you would choose, oh, I want to settle with Bitcoin, or I want to settle with XRP, or maybe at some point I want to settle with a bank wire or something else. So really depending on how you want to run your node, this is where you would choose it. Right now we just have a testnet, and we have what's called the stub settlement. So that's what I was referring to earlier, which is a simulated settlement. It's not actually doing anything. It just waits for a second, and then it says, I've settled. So that's what we have so far. So we're going to click on that. And with that, we have a node set up. You get a payment pointer, so people can send money to you. And then you've got a send button, so you can send money to others. And that's pretty much what we have so far. I'll also show you some of the debug features, so you can look a little bit under the hood. Again, this is probably not going to make a lot of sense until you're more familiar with Dasi. But basically, here's the different Dasi nodes. They all have like a randomly generated address. We can see who they're peered with, and then we can see our peering state with respect to them. So I'll not get into too much detail there, but if you're interested in it, please talk to me afterwards, and I will explain everything in excruciating detail. All right, now I want to show you an actual payment. Obviously, that's what you're all here to see. So we have two Dasi nodes running here. One is test 1, one is test 2. These are two of the public testnet nodes. And I'm going to start by sending $1 from test 1 to test 2. So I'm going to put in the payment pointer. The reason that loading message disappeared is because it actually did query that node, make sure it exists. And so now I can say continue. And it's asking me how much I want to send, and I'm going to send $1. So now it's asking me to review all the conditions of the payment, and so I will confirm that, and it's already done. Thank you. Now, this is a sort of an opportunity for teaching some things about Interledger. So as you saw, it didn't go in one frame. This might have been a little bit fast to see, but it sort of ticked down, right? Like it's tick, 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 tick. And so the reason for that is Interledger is a packetized protocol. So when we send a payment, we don't just send all the money at once. We actually split the payment up into packets. Now, why do we do that? Well, I mentioned earlier in the talk that we were trying to get the magic of the internet. And one of the things about the internet that makes it so magical is this packetization. Why does that matter? Well, because of the packetization, the traffic across the internet is very homogeneous. You don't get like, oh, here's a big file transfer, and oh, here's a phone call, and here's a video call, and here's something else. No, you just get packets, and the packets all look more or less the same. And that's what allows it to be universal infrastructure that you can use for everything from a file transfer to a phone call. And so if you translate that to money, it is a huge difference for somebody to process a huge payment versus a tiny payment. And so you need very different processes, you probably have different risk management, and so on. And so the way Interledger gets around that is says, well, we're going to packetize large payments so that all the payments that are getting across the network are looking all more or less similar. And so then we can just optimize the risk management for these packets, like processing these packets of money. And that's a really, really important, if somewhat unintuitive, aspect of what makes Interledger magical and support all these different use cases. Another thing I want to show you is when I have two nodes on Dasi that are paired with one another. I mentioned that they have to settle, right? So they can send Interledger packets, but at some point you need to move actual money. And so in order to do that, these nodes, these test nodes, are using what I call the stub settlement system. Now, in this first demo, I only sent $1, which is not enough to trigger settlement, because the nodes trust each other for about $1.10. And so if I want to trigger an actual settlement, if I'm sending more than the trust in the network, that still works, but it's going to have to settle several times over the course of that payment because I'm exceeding the maximum trust in the network. So I'm going to set up another payment. I'm going to send the remaining $4 here. And now what you'll see is about $1.10, a little bit less, go across initially. And then it's going to stop. And now it's waiting to settle. And then it settles, and then it does another $1, and so on and so forth. So you can see, like, if you were to send like a huge amount over Interledger, depending on the amount of trust in the network, you might have many, many settlement periods that were involved. And so the way I kind of envision this playing out is that when we first start, it's really going to be best for small amounts. So that means some of the financial access use cases that we're very interested in. That means very technical use cases like AI payments and API payments and other things like that are going to be the first sort of things that this would be good for. And it's not really going to be for big corporate payments until the network has grown a lot and there's much higher trust limits. And then eventually, I think Interledger can serve almost any kind of payment. So that's sort of what it looks like, and that covers it for the demo. So I'm going to hop back into the slides. And with that, I will pause to ask if anybody has any questions. So thank you so much. All right. Okay, I see a question back there. Okay, we got one back there.
Hey, everybody. Is it working? All right, cool. I'm Anthony from Bowie, and essentially, I'm a nonprofit founder. We're a humanitarian organization. We literally work directly with people who are in impoverished circumstances, X, Y, and Z. How could this be applied to help somebody that's actually, let's just say in poverty, for example? How can this be implemented to help people under those circumstances?
Yeah, those are great questions. So the way I think about it is we right now have a patchwork of different solutions. So we might have, in some countries, mobile money that we can leverage and hook into. In another place, we might have to use cash. In another place, it might work differently yet again, right? And so right now we have this sort of global patchwork. And so where Interledger and Dasi come in my view, is this is allowing us to build a global network where if you're an organization that's like based in the US, for example, and you want to send money to somebody in Kenya over M-Pesa, you don't have to worry about how that integration works. You can use Interledger to bridge those gaps and do those translations for you. That does mean a lot of infrastructure building, right? We have to actually integrate M-Pesa. We have to actually integrate some of these different networks, some of these local ways of paying. But what Dasi and Interledger can do is connect everything together globally. That's really the difference. And again, I want to be clear that Dasi itself doesn't move any money, right? So it's not itself a mechanism, it's not a currency, etc. It's just a way to tie these different things together. So you need to have some pre-existing way of moving money between people, and then you can use that and hook it into this. Again, I could probably talk for an hour just on like all the different technical problems and all the different things we'd have to solve to actually use it for that use case. But I definitely think that it solves like a key piece around the interoperability part of it. Any other questions? I see people with microphones running around. All right. Hello.
Hey, Stefan.
Hey.
Yeah, so we just integrated Interledger Money. We can issue payment pointers now. So I'm curious, how does that fit with Rafiki? So let's say a user has a payment pointer issued by Money, and they want to fund that wallet from their Dasi account. How would that work?
Yeah, great question. So one of the goals I have for this very conference is to spend some time with the folks working on open payments implementations and Rafiki to see what it would take to integrate Rafiki with Dasi. There's already been some work on both sides to make that easier and prepare for that. So hopefully we can make some progress on that during this event. But basically right now what Dasi uses is an older protocol called SPSP, which we used to use before we had open payments. So the idea is definitely to upgrade that to open payments and switch that.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Not sure how many microphones are on. My name's Stephanie Perrin. I'm here from Canada. I was just wondering, it does seem that building out that network of nodes is lot of work, a lot of diplomacy. Have you thought about contacting existing organizations? One does not think about the post office when one thinks about the internet, but when it comes to actually reaching people who are poor, they're there already, and they do have a network, and it might be a cheap and easy way to get a lot of nodes up if they would cooperate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And that's part of what I'm so excited about this event, because it's bringing people with very different expertise. Like, my expertise is very much on the technical side, and so I don't know very much about development work and how to bring communities in to use these tools. So I'm very, very excited to talk to folks who have more experience in those fields to figure out how we can pull that off. I think the basic idea with Dasi was to just have something where if you have a computer, like if you have a running computer, which I know is a big if, but if you have a running computer, you can basically set up a node. And so with that as a tool, hopefully we can figure out how to convince people to actually do that. My sort of experience with this has been around Bitcoin, where it was a similar experience. You had to download the software, you ran it, it connects to the network, and then you're up and running. But obviously it was still a large battle to kind of get a lot of people interested in it. And ultimately with Bitcoin, we were lacking some of the features and, like I said, the scalability and so on to really make it the success that we were looking for. But hopefully with Dasi, we have that same low barrier to entry, but then a lot more scalability and also the ability to go tie in existing payment systems, which I think is really, really important to make this scale. All right. Oh, there's some more questions. I don't know.
Awesome project, and you mentioned that it's open source. Are you currently open to contributions, and if so, do you have a roadmap for features that we can contribute to?
That's a great question. So yeah, up until this point, I haven't really spent much time on documentation and kind of making it easy to contribute to. That's going to be a much bigger priority for this coming year. And so the best places to kind of watch are the GitHub. So I'm going to add more, here's how to contribute, here's some of the explanation of how the code base is organized and so on. And feel free to file issues. If you download and install Dasi and you run into a problem, feel free to file an issue on the GitHub. Everything is linked on dasi.land, so you can find everything there. And yeah, thank you for anyone who's willing to offer to contribute. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm here. So hi, I'm Neha, and I represent Planetable. My question is, what about the digital accessibility into the protocol that we are developing, and do we have a roadmap around that?
Yeah. So there's, obviously when you're building a prototype, there are definitely some rough edges around that. I've tried to use best practices, so it uses ARIA for accessibility in much of the user interface. But to be honest, I haven't done a whole lot of testing if that actually works and it actually translates into the experience that we'd hope for. This is probably a great area also for contribution, so anyone who's interested in accessibility, please come in and help. And yeah, so hopefully the seeds are planted, is what I would say. And in terms of things like translating it into different languages, making it work on less reliable internet, things like that. Again, I think the fundamentals of Interledger are designed for that. Just like the internet is designed to be run on top of imperfect networks, Interledger is designed to run on top of imperfect payment methods and payment rails and an imperfect network. And so theoretically, we should be able to get to a really high standard in that area, but it's going to take work. It's not going to just magically work with at this current stage. All right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't have my glasses on, but I think we're good on questions. So once again, the website is dasi.land, so if you're interested in getting involved, there's not a lot there yet, but please come around, say hi, and yeah, if you see me during the conference, please feel free to say hi as well. I'm happy to talk to you, and thank you for listening. That's it for me. Thank you.
I think Stefan needs another hand for putting up with those technical issues. Well, that was very insightful, Stefan. Thank you very much. It certainly is magic what you all are creating here, and what you do really matters. And to the great questions and great comments about discussions, can we use them in post offices? We're seeing that technology or the inclusion in countries like Brazil to reach more people. So it's really exciting to see how development, international development, thoughts about how do we bring this to help the most poor from Bowie. That's awesome. It's great to have that collaboration. This is what this is about. It's about bringing all the minds together to do better, to do more, and to really carry out the vision. I've got another vision for you all, and that is a short break. And so what I would encourage you in this time, there's so much to talk about, is to really, while the ideas are fresh in your mind, to reach out and talk to some of the people that you've met so far and you've heard from. So we will take a short break and expect you back in the room at 11:15. So let's aim for 11:14. Come back in, get some caffeine and some sweet treats right outside these doors. Thank you very much. All right, welcome back. I hope you got some of those great alfajores that were out there, some good caffeine for you. You know what's interesting about these summits is that sometimes it's not about having all the right answers, it's about asking the right questions. And I think that's what I heard out there in the hallway. There were a lot of questions. And you know, I feel very inspired by a lot of discussions that I've heard just from the morning, and some of the synergies. I can feel it. It's like that magic that Stefan was talking about. Well, what I want to do now is get to our first panel of our first day, to an issue that really matters to so many of you. And what are the challenges to cross-border payments in the Insta era? And to help us answer those questions and more, I'm going to invite our panelists. So if you could please come up. Leanna, Bruna, Nee, Jayshree, Shelly, please come up on stage. Let's give them a warm applause. Thank you.
Is my mic work? Yeah. Hi, everyone. So, let's reset. Before I start, I just want to give 2 rounds of applause. Just wait until I finish. The first one goes to the ILF team, and the second one goes to the person who decided to put a timer in here for me to speak in 45 minutes in the most controversial topic, actually. So, give a round of applause. Thank you so much, please. Before we start, I want you to engage with us. I hope I'll get to the Q&A. But as part of engagement, I need your mobiles, your QR, to please answer the question of how long do you expect a cross-border payment to be credited into a beneficiary's account? We're going to give it a minute, and then we'll see the answers. We tried that. It should be working even from the furthest. I can still see some phones up. At least our CEO's phone is up. Both of them. And yeah. Well, okay. Depends. 1:30. No, I'm actually looking for, okay, we have 0.1. We have less than a day. One said 3 seconds. Interesting. I wasn't expecting that, actually, and we have... This leads us to the questions. So basically, if we look at cross-border numbers, and this is not only for instant payment, we have around 150 billion or trillion USD moving around the globe, with a 13% increase from last year, and the largest corridor remains between US and Latin America. I want to discuss the models for cross-border, and I just added the instant payment part just to give you a context of our discussion and on the challenges themselves. However, those models are not the only ones that are deployed. Some of them are deployed, some of them are still under development, and we have other models, but those are the main ones. The first one is financial institutions to financial institutions, and when I say financial institutions, it's not only banks, mobile wallet service providers, IMTOs, fintechs, you name it. So basically, they create a mesh network where they all connect together, whether with APIs, direct integrations, whatever the underlying technology they're connecting to. One of the challenges, or it's very costly, because each and every node needs to maintain a certain SLA, a certain connectivity, and it needs actually to make sure that its interfaces with each and every leg remains the same. So if any from the node decides to change anything on their data requirements and so on, it requires whoever is integrated to do the full change. So it's very costly on financial institutions. The second one, and clouds, by the way, are either jurisdictions or countries. The second one is basically you have 2 countries or 2 jurisdictions. They have instant payment systems, and they're deployed in the country for domestic payment systems. And you have an intermediary or one financial institution that's connected to both payment systems. And it acts as like a router between those two. The issue is maybe it's less complicated from like an overview, but when you look at the financial institution, the intermediary itself, it really makes a headache in terms of handling settlements, reconciliation, as Stefan just said, in terms of just making sure that it's connected to both nodes, in terms of actually abiding by the scheme rules of each and every system. And once you scale it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So with 2 nodes, it looks nice. With 3, that's fine. And then if you scale it, it will be much more costly. The second one is basically what's probably most of global payments are just working on, is actually connecting the systems themselves, so system-to-system connectivity. One-to-one is very easy. And the issue is that you need lots and lots of mappers, you need lots and lots of converters, because like if you have 2 systems, that's easy. But even if both systems are using the same set of APIs, or using the same standards, you name it, ISO 202, 85, 83, whatever the standard was, the problem is with the tags. Not all systems use the same fields and the same tags to move their payments. Some use this tag, or others use that tag. So you need lots and lots of mappers and configurations. And if you have multiple payment systems connected together, you'll get a spaghetti-based kind of approach, which makes it very hard to scale, very hard to upgrade, because each and every upgrade will actually affect all of the participants and all of the systems. When it comes to cross-border in general, you have like the normal ones, like in terms of disputes, it's issue, because you will be just handing the payment to multi-layers, and then if a payment fails at a certain point of time, you just need to know where it actually failed to be able to initiate disputes, FX. Stefan, thank you for the presentation. Settlement as well, tracking, traceability, cost, and so on. But for the upcoming 40 minutes, that's how stressful is that. We're actually going to be just discussing the top 3, like we thought that would be good to discuss. And before we start, your phones again, please. Just want to know, if you can rank those challenges, you can just click on the first, second, and third challenges, and they'll be ranked. We'll just give it a minute. There's 1 or 2. So you just click on them, and then they'll be ranked based on your clicks. First comes first, second, and third. Let's see. So regulatory compliance comes like first, standardization and the data integration, data privacy and consumer protection. Actually, I did expect that, especially for the first one. This actually, this was a kickoff to our panel. Just another round of applause for my panelists today, so we can start. Bruna, within your research that you've been doing, can you just give us an overview of the most challenges in regulatory scheme?
Yes, I actually expected the result as well. I'm the killjoy. But actually, we have been researching, and there have been lots of surveys with providers to identify inside the compliance challenge which ones are bigger. So the World Economic Forum, OECD, Thomson Reuters, you sent me, surveyed the market, and they identified that many challenges, but I like to group them in 3 because of time also. But and I like to provide context to everyone. I'm Brazilian, so I speak from PIX experience, and if it's the Brazilian Instant Payment Solution platform, if any of you don't know, it's provided by the central bank for private providers to develop products from there. And now they're trying to make it cross-border. So I'll talk about global challenges, but I believe the Brazilian experience with PIX provides some insights on what we can do to solve the problems. We haven't solved it, but maybe it's a starting point for discussion. But I believe we can summarize the challenges in 3 categories. First, it's outdated national regulatory frameworks. Second, it's a coordination problem, so coordinating regulatory frameworks from different jurisdictions. And third, it's regulatory costs. It's actually directly related to the second one. But commenting very briefly on each one. When it comes to the national regulatory frameworks. Digital and instant payments are evolving in terms of technology much faster than regulation can keep up. Not only payment regulation, because for example, with Pix, we needed to update that to be able to launch Pix, but adjacent regulation. So for example, when it comes to cross-border, our foreign exchange law was from mid-20th century. It didn't account for digital anything. Imagine cross-border. So this is very common in various jurisdictions, and when it comes to emerging economies who are leaders in instant payments, this is very, very much true. So when it comes to providers, legal certainty, and how do we develop new products and cross-border products without an updated judicial landscape, it becomes a problem. Considering how Brazil is dealing with it, with Pix, I believe our experience is that regulators and private providers are working together to update the laws. So when Pix was, it is a part of a bigger agenda called Agenda BC #, which not only develops technology and digital payments, instant payments, and other open finance, but a central pillar was updating the regulation while we were developing it, so that providers could be certain they could foster their mindsets and their new ideas without worrying about this problem. That's how our foreign exchange law was updated last year. When it comes to coordination, the first thing everyone says is sanction screening, AML, CFT. But this is not true only for that. It's difficult coordinating taxation, data protection. And it becomes a problem so big that OECD actually reported that 75% of providers they surveyed said that it actually significantly impacted their financial performance. 71% told them that it was what kept them from developing cross-border products. So it is a big challenge, and I believe, at least in Brazil, the perspective is reducing scale. So a provocation is, if the project is too big, coordination problems will be too high. So with Pix, we started like, what is the problem we have? Let's try solving one problem, and let's try making it cross-border with a few partners where legal coordination may be easier. So the first proposal was, let's try to make Pix cross-border with Colombia and Uruguay, which are neighboring South American countries. We have a lot of tourism, we have a lot of migrants. So trying to solve this problem and making cross-border instant payments viable for smaller objectives. And also the idea that we built the platform for private providers to be able to develop upon that. So actually Interledger has grantees that are trying to make cross-border solutions with Pix. So the idea that smaller projects, smaller scale to solve a very concrete problem, it's easier when it comes to coordination. But specifically, sanction screening becomes a problem when it comes to how instant do you want your instant payment to be. Because if you have an alert, and it was actually reported by Project Nexus, which is very ambitious, but their own report from March, they said, sanction screening is a problem. There's only so much technology can do. Because if there is an alert, it has to be manually checked, and this could add 24 hours for the money to be given to the beneficiary. So dealing with sanctions and AML and CFT, it's a problem, but coordination is a bigger picture. It's not only AML. And lastly, when it comes to costs, all that costs a lot of money. So Thomson Reuters actually reported that a third of providers are projecting their compliance teams they have to grow even if they have to keep budgets the same, they have to hire more people. OECD also reported that it became a very hard, it wasn't actually OECD, it was World Economic Forum, that it reached almost 300 billion in costs, dollars, to the compliance with fraud and all these problems. So these 3 points are the main problems we have to tackle. They are problems for cross-border payments overall. When you make them instant, you just make these problems bigger. But Brazil is actually trying to keep the scale smaller, to help. I believe we're going on a good path, but a lot of problems to solve.
I like the concept of baby stepping, actually, like solving a problem at a time and then just expanding that. It gives you more room to actually check the problems, the actual problems, even the micro ones that do not like appear out of this, and it just gives you a more robust and a more solid solution. Jay. In terms of data privacy, consumer protection, and all of that. Implications for cross-border data flows, international data sharing agreements, if you talk about instant ones, and you have so many people saying you have different regulations in each and every country. How you perceive that? How you look at that? And Bruna did mention also the cost as well and the consumer protection. So I would like to hear your feedback.
No, I think it's a great question. I'm going to actually dial back to when we think about leaving no one behind, who are the consumer segments that we're speaking about? Because I don't think we can speak about consumer protection risks as a homogeneous block. I think it depends on which segments we're speaking about and what are the risks that they encounter. So at the retail level, cross-border payments are obviously most important to economic migrants, people that want to send money back home. We think about, especially the 1 billion that have been included in the last decade of work that has happened in the inclusive finance space. Increasingly, as a result of geopolitical risks or changing weather patterns, we also see migration happening and people being forcibly displaced. They constitute a whole new problem. Because a lot of them tend to be undocumented or may have tiered KYC, which means that they have limited access to some of the services that Bruna just described. And then there's MSCs who obviously are the engine of every country's economic growth and development. So there's a lot of incentive to make sure that they can, they can operate or pay people, pay their suppliers, or get payments from their consumers. Again, there with the changing nature of work, we have to think about trends like gig workers or people in the creative economy and how do they get paid across payments. And for each of these segments, each of these, whether it's retail or business, they're all doing some kind of cost-benefit analysis in their head. So they're thinking about the amount of money that they have to pay. So how much does this cost to send money back home or to receive money? Is there transparency in what is the actual amount that gets credited to the recipient's account finally? Or is that going to be a massive surprise? In several cases, that is a surprise because we don't know what the FX rates are, we don't know what the float is. The speed is important. It could be more important for MSCs than for somebody who's a migrant who's sending money back home, unless it's for an emergency. And then there's the issue of guaranteed delivery. And finally, because we're dealing with a segment that may not have access to smartphones, that may not have access to computers, that may be dependent on an agent at the last mile to get the money out, we are also talking about issues of fraud. We're talking about liquidity problems that agents might face. And so there are all these problems with, when we talk about consumer protection. So I think we need to take a little bit of a segmented approach there. I can go on. Do you want me to?
Yeah, please.
So what are the other, at a systems level? So now that I've established and added color to who these consumers might be and what are the problems that they might face, at a systems level, there is still, consumer protection really forces us to think about, is there recourse and is there redressal when things start going wrong? And things start going wrong with instant payments if I've sent money to the wrong person, if the agent has typed in a wrong number, And then there isn't really a redressal, there isn't a redressal mechanism. And we deal a lot, my colleague Colin is in the audience, but we think a lot about the voice of the consumer. And as I was preparing for this panel, I started looking for repositories of consumer complaints. There actually aren't any, because I don't think there is a mechanism by which we can gather any kind of complaint that happens at the last mile and almost escalate that to what needs to be solved in the system itself. Then there are the problem of enforceable legal, what is the law of the land that we follow, especially when there are so many intermediaries in the process, whose law holds good. There are about, just as a data point, there are about 26,000 laws or regulatory compliances that need to happen globally when you talk about cross-border payments. So, that's a large number to think about. And then finally, the payment systems in most countries are not at the same level. So if we talk about integration, there's a lot that needs to happen. If you talk about India and Singapore, of course, there's a lot that's already happened. But, if you think about other corridors, the infrastructure needs to be built. Who's going to pay for that? And where is that going to come from? All of those ultimately cascade into some kind of a consumer protection problem.
Speaking of consumer protection and customer centricity specifically, and I find it very hard for me, I do consider myself hopefully a financially literate person working in payments. Yet when I do cross-border, it's very hectic in terms of the things that I need to fill in terms of the things that I need to know. I actually need to know lots of codes and either an IBAN, you have the full name, and it's over and over and over. And then this brings me, Shelley, to you. I think I cannot sugarcoat the question. I was trying so hard yesterday just to put it in a nice way. I didn't put it on the screen. I'm just going to say it. So I have two things that I want you to address. One is related to name screening and sanction screening. We've had it even with our domestic instant payment. Financial institutions are very protective and very solid when you talk about that. They don't do after the fact or post. They just want it pre, they want to be cleared. That defeats the whole purpose of instant payments. And especially that in Jordan, our timeout is less than 10 seconds. So usually systems and screening systems cannot just actually do that in less than 10 seconds. So specifically for cross-border, how do you see compliance and regulators do with that? I like the fact of collaboration that Bruna did. That's the first part. The second part is, and also you mentioned that we have in payments, usually you have different departments or entities actually regulating a certain flow. So you have people with the AML, and then you have the payments oversight. There's when you want to just regulate or do that, there's a gap in between. There's nothing in between that would actually support cross-border and instant ones. So I just want your thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting because there's probably not many people in this room that have got sympathy for regulators.
Can you just hold the mic up? I think.
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm not sure that there's many people here that have got sympathy for regulators, but there is a bit of sympathy from me. I am an ex-regulator. But if you just think about currently what regulators are having to grapple with in terms of finance. So, there's a speed in which technology is developing, and we all know that they're struggling to keep up. They are traditional, they're built on traditional finance, they have legacy systems, they quite often don't have the skills and the knowledge within the regulator, so they don't understand the technologies that are being presented to them. They haven't got, teams and teams of data scientists in most cases, so they don't necessarily understand how to build the tools or to use the tools. They've also seen an unprecedented amount of new products coming into the market. So, different business models, different approaches. As new technologies build on top of this, it's complex. I think also to remember that in a lot of jurisdictions at the moment, we're dealing with a lot of financial unrest. So, the current situation in the world adds to the instability in a lot of countries. So in a lot of central banks at the moment, their focus is very much on keeping the economy stable. Like that's like firefight number one. So then you're looking at all these other things that are coming in. So, you know, we're saying, oh, what about cross-border payments? And what are you doing about AI? And, you know, oh, have you seen Gen AI lately? It's really interesting. And these regulators are saying, wow, like this is insane. We don't know where to start. And we talk a lot about the cost of compliance, but there is also a cost to the regulators to build the systems within. And we was talking about this the other day, and we think some of the biggest economies, so the UK, MAS, probably Dubai, have spent about $500 million in building the capacity and the structure within their organization to regulate new technologies and new products. And that is not accessible to most regulators and most central banks. So they are lagging behind. They are trying to play catch up constantly. And I also think regulators are built to be risk averse. Like that is their whole point. And one of the things we were thinking about is the financial regulatory system is like a giant game of Jenga. Everything's built on top of each other. It's all kind of interwoven, and it's very difficult for a regulator to take a piece out. For them, like the risk of the whole thing collapsing is huge. But what I kind of see from a technology point of view is, I don't know how many of you have ever played Jenga, but when you get to that point and you're kind of tapping at a few bricks to see if, you know, if it's loose and if you can kind of move it out. And that's how I see technology, as kind of this tester of, we're going to have to remove a brick. We're going to have to take a risk in order to, you know, take advantage of some of this technology that will change finance. And so at some point, someone's going to have to do that. And I do see that happening with regulators. I do see that first step, and we've talked a little bit about kind of cross-border cooperation that's happening, which is hugely important because regulators are siloed by nature. They're siloed internally. So now we're asking them to build these kind of huge ecosystems globally, which is very difficult. You know, there's a lot of geopolitical issues. There's lots of, you know, problems that sit underneath. You have to be really careful about how you do that. Someone's already mentioned that regulators are at different levels and countries are at different levels. So, you know, like their payment systems, their regulation systems are also very different. So that's a couple of things, I think, in terms of the problems, and I think there are risks for regulators in this. But thinking about the solutions, I think, you know, to kind of be a little bit more positive, one of the things that I think regulators need to do is they can't rely on policy alone anymore. So they're going to have to start regulating innovation with innovation. And one of the things that you mentioned, Bruna, was around, you know, the cost of, you know, how they regulate KYC, for example. And there's tools out there. There's innovation coming through. Privacy-enhancing technology. I've mentioned AI, you know, as a tool for regulators to help them regulate the markets. So we need to see more of that. We need to see regulators, again, taking the risks, building out their internal capability, relying on technology a little bit more in order to regulate the environment. In terms of policies themselves, they are going to have to think about being more flexible. There's different ways to apply regulations. There's different ways to think about, you know, how you bring, what was it, 26,000 regulations and bring those down. There's payment corridors, safe payment corridors and things like that. So there are things out there. And what I'd really, you know, something that I'm very passionate about is seeing more testing. So cross-border testing needs to happen. And I think Bruna's right in that if you've got some really good use cases, some small, you know, start small use cases where we can test some of this, we can get the right people in the room, not just regulators. We need the private sector. We need the technologists. We need people that understand the technology to come together and kind of start testing how this applies. So sandboxes. We love the word sandboxes as a regulator. You know, more of that testing, more of that freedom to allow new technology and new tools to test what that works, how that works in theory.
Yeah, like the idea is that the regulators, like in general, they're always lagging behind. So it's not this specific. It's not a country-specific thing, and they're more into policy that I have to agree to. And there should be a balance between to which extent actually regulators need to just loosen up. I like the things that Ms. Maha used always to say. Like sometimes you need to use the laissez-passer model, like to just tap on the things, and let's see, and they said like sandboxing and so on. And I do understand like there should be a balance to that. If you want to read more about the cost of compliance, the Reuters, they have this report that they issued, cost of compliance reports, that actually tackles lots of points. So it's not only stuff and that. Okay, like I want you from a technical perspective, from your experience, what you've been through from technical challenges, like they were the most like hindering all of your work when it comes to cross-border and instant ones, and then we'll move to on what you're doing with ILP now.
Thank you so much. I think the technology in the cross-border payment is complex, right? It's clear, but I think compared to other challenges that has been mentioned previously, especially the regulatory, I think it is something that can be solved. It needs coordination. It needs a lot of the champions around the different jurisdictions to come together. When we are talking about cross-border payments, we are talking about different jurisdictions to agree on the regulatory compliance, not just within their, the country or jurisdiction, but across jurisdiction when it comes to AML screening and all this, the data that can be shared, safely. What is the data privacy, data sovereignty for each country versus what is required, right, for the recipient of this fund, right, to be able to clearly accept that this is coming from a good source, right? So there are, a lot of challenges that we can talk about when it comes to data and integration. One of them, right, could be the address that we use to send, right, to the other party, right? So the alias resolution has been resolved within a jurisdiction most of the time, especially in countries where there are national payment systems. But when you are sending money across to the other jurisdiction, and if you are using instant payment system, most of the time we are using alias. It could be a phone number, it could be any alias that is agreed between these jurisdictions. And how do you resolve that across this jurisdiction is something that we need to work out. It is not something that is impossible to solve, right? But it requires a lot of coordination. All the stakeholders coming together, agreeing on what alias to use and how it will be resolved. And you mentioned about the three models of connection, financial institutions connecting to each other, a hybrid model, and also the national payment systems connecting with one another. And we are seeing the trend that the third model of national payment systems are connecting to one another, just like what Bruna mentioned about Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, I think is the model that we are seeing. When we are also talking about that, we also have the different messaging standards that are used in those national payment systems. That is also a consideration to be made. A lot of the national payment systems are currently thinking about or in the process, right, to migrate into ISO 20022, right, standard. That's just one example. And when you are talking about integrating between these systems, then you need to understand what version of ISO 222 the other system is using, whether they are interpreting the messages the same way that you are interpreting, and that becomes a coordination, right, to be add to this complexity that is already there. And in some cases, right, when you started integrating between two national payment systems, it is manageable. But when you start adding the third, the fourth, right, then it becomes really complex. So in some implementations, we are seeing switch for the switches, right, approach, right, where there is a regional switch that connects all the switches, right, to that regional switch. So that becomes an added layer of cost and also complexity, but it is something that is necessary. And there are other considerations that goes into that. The FX providers who will provide the FX, who will manage the FX risk, settlement model, and something as maintained as the time zones differences, right? Because sometimes the sender financial institutions in one time zone, the recipient is in another time zone. FX provider is operating in a different time zone, and also the settlement is probably happening in a regional hub, which is probably in a different time zone. So when you are talking about all these time zones, right, you also need to add into the report generation, settlement model, all these considerations. They can be solved, right? But those are the things that I think we need to add.
Just to be frank, it looks nice on paper. No, really, when you get the things like the overall, the vision, it really looks nice. Like, I cannot admit it's nice and tempting, but once you start working, like you mentioned so many things in terms of standardization, even if two payment systems are actually using the same standard, yet certain tags are used, others are not used, others are mandatory, others are optional. We've been through this, and we're still going through that. The value dates of the payment, specifically working different time zones, that would make a difference, because payment might be rejected because of value date that's not yet, it's a future value dates, and instant payment do not work with future value dates, at least in Jordan. And in terms of, I just want to say, we're not here to solve the issues. I just want to ignite a discussion afterwards, and we're happy to take any questions after we're done. And so as a closing remark, because I want to see if we have questions. So as a closing remark from each of you, and Jay, I'll start with you, and then, yeah.
I don't know about a closing remark, but I can tell you what the vision is, as far as inclusion is concerned. So one is, that we should bring down costs to as close to domestic payments as possible. I know the Financial Stability Board has a target for retail and merchant. I think it's 1% for retail and 3% for merchant. But it'll be great to bring down the costs. I think the second thing is have real-time fraud detection measures, because I think with instant payments, there's quite a real risk that you also erode trust, and that can be very dangerous, particularly for the newly included, or the ones that we want to include. Also those with scarce resources. And then the third thing is, I'd love to see some of the regulatory silos being broken. And I think we do need to get people to talk more across borders, but also within the country. It's a wish list.
Yeah. I believe 2 messages, but that's it. It's not solutions. We don't have it. But the first one is that maybe having very concrete problems to solve with well-defined use cases and starting small, it keeps the regulatory challenges and risk more controlled than trying to solve cross-border payment, instant payments as a whole. And the second is that I do believe, and I'm not the only one, that the success PIX has domestically and is trying to have cross-border comes down to stop seeing the regulator not seeing itself as someone who's trying to pull back, but push innovators forward. So, but it only worked not only because the central bank started seeing itself like that, but because private providers believed it. So this coordination, this idea that we have a platform, let's work together to develop it. So we start domestically, and now we're trying to make it cross-border, but together. It has to come from both sides. So we have this, we had this partnership with the central bank from the think tank where I work. They will launch a book called Innovator Regulator, a regulator innovator. I don't know what sounds better in English, but that's it. Regulator has to innovate, but the market has to believe that they can help and not only hinder the project.
It's like market-led, innovator pushed, kind of.
By regulators, yes.
Yeah. Shelley.
So I won't, I +1 to everything that's just been said. But one thing I'll leave you with when we talk about why regulators should take a risk, so just a very quick check on AML at the moment and KYC. So currently, there's about $2 trillion a year laundered through the system. And 1% is detected. So that doesn't seem like a success to me at the moment. So when we think about, you know, why should we take this leap? Why should we start testing the regulations? Why should we start testing the system? It's because at the moment we're failing anyway. So it's a little bit like, why not?
Yeah, 1% is like
1%. And that's not a reason for everyone to money launder. Like, you will get found out. You might be the 1%.
Nate?
Sometimes when we talk about cross-border payments, we have this vision that we're talking about high-value transfers between banks, right? But in some of the projects where I was involved, we are talking about cross-border traders coming from one country to the other to sell small goods and having to carry cash, right, to make those transactions. We are talking about cross-border payments for those people who can use these tools, right, to make a big difference in their life. Right? So I'm very inspired by different technologies and different projects that are happening right in this room, where people are talking about how to make the money movement quicker, more efficient, more costly, more cost-effective. I think it has a real-world impact for people who are not in this room, and I thank you for that.
I'll have just two closing remarks. One is how instant you want your cross-border payments to be, and I do believe that regulators, like, eventually they need to work it out. There should be a balance, but to what extent, I think that depends on actual use cases, and I like the model of the private sector actually pushing for that, and as well as customers. And probably the third takeout is, can we really make payments as easy as emails, and what does it take? So that's, I was waiting for that answer, Alex, coming from you specifically. So just wanted to leave you with that question, with the things that we have, and I think we have like 4 minutes to get any questions. If not, I see some, yeah. Someone is, yeah. Can we get the mic over there, please?
Thank you for the great presentation. Mine is more around blockchain and also how it influences cross-border payments and probably what the regulator has learned, data standardization, and also consumer, consumer protection.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, like, again, like?
Yeah, my name is Malcolm Castero. I'm from Uganda. So I wanted to know the role of blockchain, that's cryptocurrency, in relation to cross-border, and also touching the 3 points. That's, of course, content protection, consumer protection, the regulator, and also, okay, that one is skipping me, but yeah, the 3 touch points.
Anyone from the panelists want to take this with blockchain and cross-border?
I think, well,
we've discussed that actually yesterday.
From a regulatory point of view, most regulators don't currently regulate crypto markets, or if they do, they don't do it very well. So, the same applies. Regulators need to start thinking about how they can regulate it in a proportionate way that allows a technology that has certainly got use cases and has certainly got the opportunity to transform the financial services system, but it has to be proportionate. And as I say, I think the barriers to that are still around regulators being able to understand that, understand the technology, understand the potential. And then in terms of consumer protection, there's a huge amount of use cases out there that blockchain can solve many consumer protection issues. But again, there needs to be testing, there needs to be work done with groups to work together to kind of find out what those are and how to apply them in a safe environment.
From my perspective, like blockchain is just the underlying technology, it's crypto. What I think regulators are just, it's taboo now. I do understand why for regulators, but I think I do agree with Shelley in terms of testing, just to see how it goes, what benefit does it give, and why actually people are just using it more than other payment tools. So that should be enlightening to regulators as well. Yep, I have one in the middle.
Okay, thank you for this. I wanted to ask two questions. The first one was around a resource that you mentioned, cost of compliance. I don't know if that was a website or a .pdf, but I would love to, put our hands on that. And I think the second question is around the regulatory landscape. So I do concur with the note around regulators should regulate innovation with innovation. And we're just trying to find out, some of the different ways that you've seen around the world that we can kind of work with regulators and kind of get to the table way before we need to get the licensing in place, so we can kind of show them some of the technology and the innovation that we're using in the hopes that they can better understand it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, for the report, it's published online. I can show you, like you can access the report. It was published recently. For regulators, Shelley did mention regulatory sandbox. I don't think innovations need to be regulated at the beginning. I believe that innovation needs to be tested, needs to be verified under the regulator to have like a direct communication between innovators and regulators, just because regulators need to see the value of the innovation. And then they can do like this gradually regulating innovators in case they need innovation, because not all of innovation needs a certain regulation. And if any of you would like to comment on that, please.
Just to build, I mean, there are regulatory sandboxes out there.
Yeah.
There's digital sandboxes. That is an evolving tool for regulators. But I agree. I don't think regulators are accessible enough at the moment to innovators. I don't think they are. So one of the things my company does is encourage regulators to build their ecosystem outside of the regulatory world, to invite people to sit at the table that don't normally get a seat. So I worked at the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, and we run things we call tech sprints, which are regulatory hackathons, and we did those so that we could bring the ecosystem into the regulator, so that we could understand what the challenges were, what people were building, before you get to the point, as you say, of people going off and building things and then the regulator saying, oh no, sorry, you can't build that. So I think there is an encouragement that needs to happen at many levels. And I think this, I've seen it, I've seen lots of countries, particularly in Africa, are very open to kind of collaborating with the tech industry. And I think it is moving in the right direction, but regulators, again, just need to get comfortable, and they need to open their doors to the innovation community and have those conversations.
Also, if regulators are not proactive, it is the case for Brazil, they were proactive, but if they're not, I believe people in this room, people from universities, socials, the civil society, innovators, with communities like the one we are right now, providing information and making a statement that this should be the way. It's why we discuss, it's why we debate. If this proactivity from the regulators, if it doesn't come from them, it can come from us, from a place of debating and promoting the discussion and asking for innovators to be brought into the discussion. It's not like, oh, we want you to accept everything, but let us make our case. I believe it's why we're here, actually. It helps a lot.
I think I passed the time. I apologize. Like, I see people nodding. I'm happy to take questions. We'll be around. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again to our panelists. That was an amazing panel. You gave a lot of context. And I think a lot of us, we don't know what we don't know. So thank you for that. It reminds me of a quote by Simon Sinek as I was listening to the panel, where he says, "An excessive drive for order interrupts the beautiful chaos needed for creativity to thrive." Now, as we move forward from this event, from this portion, we have 3 small things we need to do. So first, I would say I'd like to announce that we're having a party that you've probably seen in your schedules, and want to make sure that you take note of it. The party will be at 6:30 in the area behind those back doors. I want to see your creativity as you party, but also for all of you to have a great time. So keep that in mind. Tonight, 6:30, we'll have dinner and the party behind those back doors in the outside covered area. Second, we have something really cool that's happening just down the hallway. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but I'm going to invite a good friend here, Kokai, up here to give us a 60-second rundown. Kokai.
1 2 1 2 1 2. Hey, peace. How's everybody doing? Y'all doing all right? I love the last slide that was up there that asked, can we send payments as easy as an email, right? What if we can send those payments as easy? Imagine if. I love the idea of imagining. My name is Kokai Walker. I've been working with the program team since way back, right? So a few years I started as an ambassador around web monetization, and now I'm here talking about open payment systems. And what we did is designed a grant called Future Money around that idea. What if, right? What if everybody had access? What if there was a way that systems could be open? And we posed that question to a bunch of artists, right, to imagine what the future would look like, the future of money would look like. And so we have answers to that question in the form of art, where people have used data sets to create statues and films where they have imagined new futures, imagined ideas around open payments and payment systems using the technologies that are available to them, right? And so we ask that you would come by, stop by to the FM Open Studio, which is right next door. Check it out, see the art. There's places to sit down, relax, gather yourself, view this idea of open payments in tangible form in the form of art with us. Shout out to Lawil Karama and all of her work, Chris for all of his work, the program team, and Brianna for being down with the vision. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Now, Interledger Foundation is not just a protocol. It's not just a group of people who believe in code and how we can improve the world, but we're also a family. And you are all part of that family. And one of our family members today has a daughter who has a birthday, and he could not be with her. So I'm going to ask Chris to come up on stage, and we're going to do a quick video to wish his daughter, Amelia, a happy birthday. So on the count of 3, I would love for all of you to say, happy birthday, Amelia. So are you going to do a selfie, Chris, or how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I've got the video going.
Okay, all right. All right, everybody, her name is Amelia. Just happy birthday, Amelia, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for being here. All right, now, this is an exciting part of the day. Guess what comes next? Lunch. Dang, you guys are good. Lunch will be served where we had the reception, and I think most of you were there, but you're going to go down this hall, and you're going to go all the way to the end of the hall and hook a right. It's in the bar La Castilla. So if you have any questions, see someone with a black shirt on, make sure it's the right black shirt on. Have a great lunch. We'll see you here tonight for the party. Thank you.